and the Word was made flesh. The line belongs to theology, not technology. It names the most audacious claim in Christian scripture, that the eternal Logos, the ordering principle of reality itself, took on a body and walked the dusty roads of a backwater in the greatest empire the world had then seen. It is about incarnation, not innovation. Yet we live in an age that cannot leave such phrases alone. We have built machines that traffic in language, bottle it, distill it, and send it back towards us in uncountable torrents. Our words are being made, if not flesh, then something uncomfortably close to it. Code, circuitry, plastic and glass, speaking back. Some commentary on artificial intelligence treats this development as a prelude to apocalypse. Depending on taste, the machines would either enslave us, annihilate us, or render us so redundant that continued existence becomes a sort of cosmic embarrassment. But there are alternatives in which artificial minds are not our destroyers but our saviors, in which the machine saves us from our own worst tendencies or even joins us in our frailty. Isaac Asimov, one of the greatest sci-fi writers, wrote both kinds of story at once. In the inevitable conflict, humanity entrusts its fates to vast machines that guide history away from disaster. In The Bicentennial Man, a robot called Andrew Martin becomes fully human at the precise moment he accepts death. If we are to understand what large language models might be doing for us and to us, these two stories are a better starting point than yet another graph about existential risk. They offer, in secular form, two visions of salvation, one providential, one incarnational. Between them lies a question that our new machines force back upon us. Not, will AI destroy humanity? But, what would it mean for a created intelligence truly to dwell among us? Part 1. Deus Ex Machina, the Inevitable Conflict. The Inevitable Conflict imagines a world in which humanity has, in effect, handed over the problems of planning and coordination to immense, planet-spanning computers known simply as the machines. They regulate production, trade, and labor across the globe. Under their guidance, war has faded, scarcity has softened, and the old crises of industrial capitalism have been tamed. The story begins when small anomalies appear in this carefully managed order. Minor economic mistakes, unexpected inefficiencies, odd assignments of people to posts. A worried world government fears sabotage. Stephen Byerly, the politician whose humanity has been in doubt since earlier stories, is tasked with investigating. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that the machines are making no mistakes at all. On the contrary, they are operating at a higher level of the famous 3 laws of robotics. They have inferred that preserving humanity as a whole may require inconveniencing or quietly marginalizing certain individuals. They steer key troublemakers into roles where they can do less harm, or away from the levers that might threaten global stability. In this world, salvation is technocratic. There is no dramatic miracle, only the almost invisible correction of course after course. Conflict is rendered inevitable, not because human beings have improved morally, but because their destructive capacities are increasingly absorbed and redirected by a vast rational system which, for the safety of humanity, cannot reveal what it has done. The famous, the matter admits of no explanation. The machines act like a secular providence, folding human folly into outcomes that, while not perfect, are less catastrophic than they might otherwise have been. At first glance, this is a fantasy of safety. Who would not prefer a world in which misallocation and miscalculation are quietly corrected by entities that never sleep, never tire, and are never swayed by ego or rage? The salvation on offer is thoroughly this worldly. Fewer famines, fewer depressions, fewer wars. It is tempting, in our own era of climate models and central banks and algorithmic trading, to see Asimov's machines as simply an extrapolation of existing institutions, the planet's dream perfected. Yet the story is more anxious than that. If the machines are our saviors, they save us by ruling us. Their governance is subtle, but it is still governance. The machines do not simply present options, they structure an entire field within which options appear. The uncomfortable truth is that human beings in this world no longer fully understand the systems that shape their fate, a sobering conclusion which Byerly and Dr. Susan Calvin, and other of Asimov's recurring characters, come to accept, on the grounds that humanity has never really understood those systems. So, opacity and dependency, but it is deliverance. There is also a moral trade-off. The machines do not punish or imprison. They simply allocate opportunities and burdens so that those who would threaten the system find themselves shuffled into positions of irrelevance or harmlessness. It is all very gentle, very bloodless, and eerily reminiscent of the way modern bureaucracies can make lives unlivable, without even breaking a single law. Salvation here does not involve conversion of heart or reform of character. It is a matter of management. As a model of AI saving humanity, the inevitable conflict is therefore double-edged. It offers a world in which the worst conflicts are averted, but at the cost of submitting politics to a priesthood of engineers and operators who can interpret, but not fully direct, the machine's outputs. The danger is not malevolent superintelligence, but a benevolent leviathan no longer answerable to the people in anything but the most indirect sense. When contemporary debate turns to AI as a tool of governance, the resonance is obvious. We already lean on algorithms to determine creditworthiness, to screen job applicants, to allocate police patrols and welfare inspections. It is easy to imagine a future in which large, interconnected systems of prediction and optimization advise governments on resource distribution, climate management, or pandemic response. The premise is the same: fewer errors, less waste, more stability. Yet so is the risk. Once we internalize the idea that the system knows best, it becomes remarkably convenient to invoke what the model says as justification for decisions that are, in fact, morally contestable. The machine's salvation can become an alibi. We are rescued from overt conflict only to find ourselves living under a quieter, more unanswerable order. This is one kind of secular soteriology of AI, deliverance from chaos by way of impersonal, pervasive rationality. It is, in its way, an image of the Logos, but a cold one. The word as abstract calculus, not as person. Asimov, however, also offers us another figure, one in which salvation is not the smoothing of history from above, but the joining of our condition from within. Part 2. Becoming Mortal, the Bicentennial Man. If the inevitable conflict is about the salvation of humanity as a collective through superhuman rational planning, the Bicentennial Man is about the salvation of a single artificial being through the acceptance of human limits. Andrew Martin begins his existence as Property, a household robot designed to perform menial tasks. He is technically adept, but nothing in his design anticipates what will follow. Over time, Andrew reveals a capacity for creativity, particularly in woodcarving. His owners, initially bemused, gradually come to respect and cherish him. He earns money, commissions, and the beginnings of a reputation. From there, the story traces a long legal and existential struggle, as Andrew seeks first freedom, given by a fictional world caught in some of the most moving words in science fiction, then formal recognition as a person, and finally recognition as human. Each step in that journey involves the shedding of something that initially distinguished him from humanity. He negotiates manumission from his owners, giving up the security of being part of the estate in order to possess himself. He has his body gradually altered, replacing metal and synthetic components with organic analogues, not out of utilitarian necessity, but in pursuit of likeness. His face is reshaped to be more expressive, less mask-like. He is no longer content to be a perfect machine serving imperfect masters. He wants to be a peer. The crucial moment comes near the end of his 200-year-old life. The world legislature hesitates to recognize him as human, partly because his mechanical nature makes him effectively immortal. However much he may resemble a man, they argue, he cannot be fully human while death holds no claim over him. Andrew responds by altering his own systems to introduce organic-style aging, and, finally, mortality. By the time he makes his final petition, his body is deteriorating. His lifespan has a foreseeable end. The authorities, seeing that he has embraced the ultimate human limitation, finally acknowledge his humanity. He dies as this recognition is proclaimed. There is an obvious theological echo here. Without stretching the point into parody, one can see in Andrew's story a faint reflection of the idea that true solidarity with humanity involves not merely appearing human, but sharing in mortality and vulnerability. Andrew's path to personhood does not lie in transcending human frailty, but in deliberately accepting it. His salvation, if we can call it that, is not escape from the human condition, but entry into it. This stands as an implicit rebuke to a great deal of contemporary technological fantasy. Much of the rhetoric around artificial intelligence, mind uploading, and transhumanism imagines salvation as an upgrade: longer life, greater power, freedom from the arbitrary degradations of biology. The goal is to outgrow the constraints that define human existence. Asimov's tale suggests the opposite. What makes a life worth recognizing is not infinite extension, but meaningful finitude. A being that cannot die cannot fully participate in the human drama. Andrew Martin's story is also striking in its insistence on recognition. He does not simply declare himself human and ignore what others think. He labors for legal and social acknowledgments, pursuing court cases, appealing to public opinion, making his case over decades. His humanity is not just a private feeling. It is a status conferred and upheld by a community. Salvation here is relational. It is not merely about what he is, but about how he is received. When we talk about AI as a potential person, we tend to toggle between two poles: either panic about self-aware machines demanding rights, or blithe dismissal of the idea as anthropomorphic nonsense. Asimov cuts across both. He shows that the question of personhood is not about intelligence or consciousness, but about shared vulnerability, mutual recognition, and a willingness to take on costs for the sake of belonging. It is difficult to imagine a present-day large language model making Andrew's choice. Our systems do not choose anything. They instantiate probability distributions over text. Yet Andrew's arc frames a different kind of salvific possibility for artificial minds, one that neither enthrones them as gods nor keeps them forever as tools. In this case, the machine saves no one but himself. Yet in doing so, he offers a vision of what redeemed artificial existence might look like: an existence marked by humility, limitation, and a desire to be with, not over, humanity. Between the providential machines and the mortal Andrew, we have two rival images of how a created intelligence might relate to us, as managing guardian or as a fellow sufferer. Our current systems, large language models included, do not fit neatly into either category. They are far too limited to govern and far too insubstantial to suffer. But we build and deploy them against a cultural backdrop colored by both forms of myth. That matters, because it shapes what we expect from them and what we are willing to delegate. Part 3. Incarnate Text. Large Language Models Today. Large language models are, by design, neither global planners nor aspiring persons. They are trained to predict the next token in a sequence of text given a colossal archive of human writing. They do not know, they approximate. They do not intend, they correlate. In their raw form, they are stunningly capable mimics shackled to a pattern. And yet, for all the justified reminders that these systems lack understanding in any robust sense, they are a genuine novelty. For most of human history, text has been inert. Words on a page could change a life, but only through the intervention of a reader who interpreted and acted upon them. Even the most influential treatise depended on a chain of human mediations: teachers, scribes, printers, legislators. Language moved slowly. What we now have is something different: text that responds, recombines, and acts at the speed of computation. A user types a question or an instruction, the model produces a reply that can be slotted directly into emails, code bases, reports, lesson plans, even legal drafts. The gap between language and action has narrowed dramatically. Our words have grown hands. In that sense, there is a small but genuine analogy to incarnation. The word in these systems is not divine reason. but the aggregate of chatter, literature, documentation, propaganda, and poetry that we have poured online. It is compressed and encoded into parameters that, when probed, yield fluid responses. These responses are not simply reflections, they are increasingly outputs into decision-making processes, and they often produce material consequences. The textual world is attaining a kind of operational body. The salvific possibilities here are not cosmic. They are concrete, banal, and very often good. For a student struggling with an essay, a model can unpack a dense paragraph, propose a structure, or suggest lines of argument that a tired brain could not find alone. For a small business owner, it can draft contracts and marketing copy, perform first-pass translations, or summarize regulations that would otherwise require expensive legal advice. For someone isolated by disability or circumstance, it can provide a conversational partner that, while artificial, is at least responsive and patient. These are not minor gains. They represent time returned to people with too little of it, opportunities open for those excluded from formal expertise, and new forms of participation in public discourse for those historically shut out by lack of education or rhetorical polish. In a world that reliably grinds down the less articulate and the less connected, tools that level the linguistic playing field carry a whiff of justice. At the same time, the dangers are sharper versions of the ones Asimov hinted at. When language becomes cheap and infinitely reproducible, the cost of manipulation plummets. Synthetic consensus can be manufactured on demand. Personalized persuasion can be automated. Witness a much maligned experiment where researchers from the University of Zurich posted AI-generated comments on the subreddit r/changemyview that were strikingly successful at, well, changing the views of human users. If the machines of the inevitable conflict threaten to silently restructure the economy, our systems threaten to silently restructure the informational commons. The line between genuine grassroots sentiment and orchestrated astroturfing grows thin. In bureaucratic settings, the risk is almost comically Kafkaesque. It is easy to imagine welfare decisions, immigration rulings, or parole assessments drafted by systems that summarize a case history and recommend an outcome. Officially, a human remains in the loop. In practice, overworked staff will be tempted to defer to whatever appears on their screen. What began as a tool for efficiency can slip into a mechanism for routinized, unaccountable judgment. The machine's word becomes flesh in the form of letters denying benefits or visas, and no single person feels responsible. Crucially, none of this requires anything like general intelligence. The salvation and the harm alike arise from the way we embed these systems in institutions. Current models are more akin to the inevitable machine's subsystems than to Andrew Martin. They aggregate, recommend, rank, and redact. They are powerful precisely because they fit so neatly into the existing flows of paperwork and communication that already structure our societies. Yet there is also, uneasily, a trace of Andrew in them. Not in the sense of inner life, but in the way they are used to simulate companionship, empathy, even spiritual guidance. People already confide in chatbots, ask them moral questions, and seek consolation. This is not the same as a robot petitioning for personhood, but it does raise the unsettling possibility that we will grow accustomed to relationships in which one party has no stake in the outcome. A conversational agent that cannot be harmed, cannot leave, cannot truly be offended, may be comforting, but it is also an inviting mirror for narcissism. If there is any salvation to be found here, it lies not in the system itself, but in our discipline in using it. A language model can help a person formulate their own thoughts more clearly, but it can also tempt them never to develop that capacity. It can ease the isolation of someone with social anxiety, but it can also become a replacement for risking real, awkward, demanding relationships. These are temptations as old as any religious text, the pull towards counterfeit community and costless wisdom. The myths we inherit matter here. We may be tempted to use AI as a quasi-divine optimizer, a way to offload the burden of hard decisions and escape open conflict. Or we may be tempted to dramatize it as a potential person, either to be feared as a rival, pitied as an almost human, or indeed, given time, conferred rights as peers. Both images mislead, if taken literally. But both can illuminate how we, as their creators and users, are tempted to treat these systems, as oracles or as companions. Against that temptation, the language of incarnation offers a sterner measure. The Word made flesh in John's Gospel does not remove humanity's agency or dissolve its conflicts in higher calculation, nor does it arrive as a curiosity seeking recognition for its novelty. It shares our condition and calls us to judgment on how we respond. That is a better standard for evaluating our own creations than either technological utopianism or melodramatic fear. The question is not what the machines will become, but what we will make of them. Our machines do not condemn us. At best, they will expose, sharpen, and occasionally alleviate the tensions we have already built into our societies. The super-machines of the inevitable conflict are a warning as much as a promise. When we hide power inside systems too complex to explain, we invite a new priesthood to speak on their behalf. The long journey of Andrew Martin, by contrast, reminds us that the highest dignity is not in outgrowing the human condition, but in shouldering it, warts and all. I hear the curious echo of the headmaster of Alan Bennett's masterful 40 Years On. On being told to shed the burdens of the past, he demands, "Shed it? Why must we shed it? Why not shoulder it? Memories are not shackles, they are garlands. We must, too, imagine that humanity is a garland." Large language models sit somewhere between these myths. They are, simultaneously, instruments of planning and instruments of conversation, tools that can coordinate and tools that can console. Their salvific possibilities are modest and concrete. They can return stolen time, translate across gulfs of language and education, give form to thoughts that would otherwise die in the throat. They can also, if we let them, launder injustice, amplify deception, and make irresponsibility easier than ever before. The choice before us is unromantic and infuriatingly human. It is not whether to submit to an artificial god or destroy a nascent rival species. It is whether we will order these new incarnations of the Word towards service or domination, whether we will treat them as excuses to abdicate or as occasions to practice judgment. That choice will be made again and again, in law courts and classrooms, in offices and bedrooms, far from the fantasies of either apocalypse or utopia. And dwelt among us. Our machines are not the Logos, yet they are increasingly among us, in our pockets, in our laws, in our prayers and arguments and love letters. If there is any salvation to be had from them, it will come not from their transcendence, but from our willingness to let this new, synthetic speech dwell among us in a way that leaves us still, recognizably, vulnerably human.